My name is Verlaine, and I'm 20 years old. My life completely changed during my 18th birthday party. The room was filled with people when my adoptive mother, Diane, 3 glasses of champagne and grabbed the microphone and slurred, "I've done my part. 18 years of raising you for the money. Contract fulfilled." The stunned silence was broken when a couple I barely noticed all evening stood up and said, "We're your biological parents, and she's been lying to you your entire life." In that moment, I discovered my entire existence was built on a foundation of lies. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever discovered a family secret that turned your world upside down. Now let me tell you how I discovered the truth about my life. I grew up in an affluent neighborhood in Portland in a 2-story colonial with perfectly manicured lawns and a view of Mount Hood on clear days. From the outside, my life looked picture perfect. I had my own bedroom decorated in soft blues and purples, a closet full of brand-name clothes, and all the latest gadgets. But the house never quite felt like a home. My adoptive mother, Diane, was a high-profile real estate agent known for selling multi-million-dollar properties. Her face was plastered on benches and billboards across the city, always with that perfect white smile that never quite reached her eyes. She was obsessed with status, the right car, the right clothes, the right connections, and apparently, the right-looking daughter. "Stand up straight, Verlaine. First impressions are everything," she would say, adjusting my posture at social gatherings. "Remember, you represent the Harrison family now." My adoptive father, Robert, was a corporate accountant who specialized in tax strategies for wealthy clients. He traveled constantly for work, or at least that's what I was told. Looking back, I wonder how many of those business trips were just escapes from the cold atmosphere of our home. When he was around, he was quiet, retreating to his office with a glass of scotch most evenings. The emotional climate of our house was always chilly. Diane wasn't the type for hugs or bedtime stories. Instead, she showed affection through material things and only praised me when I accomplished something she could brag about to her friends. "Verlaine got straight A's again," she would announce at dinner parties. Harvard material, just like her mother. She wasn't referring to herself, of course. Diane attended Harvard, a fact she mentioned in virtually every conversation. It was just one of the many ways she subtly reminded everyone that despite adopting me, she had stamped her identity onto mine. What Diane excelled at was making me feel like I should be eternally grateful for being chosen by her. "Do you know how many children languish in the system?" she would say whenever I disappointed her. "We gave you everything. A beautiful home, private education opportunities most kids can only dream of." And materially, she wasn't wrong. I attended Westridge Academy, an exclusive private school where I was shuttled between advanced placement classes, debate team practice, and mandatory volunteer hours that looked good on college applications. I played violin not because I loved it, but because Diane insisted it was what cultured young ladies do. Every achievement was less about my happiness and more about how it reflected on the Harrison family image, despite living with Diane and Robert for 18 years. I never felt like I truly knew them. Our interactions were superficial, focused on schedules, expectations, and appearances. Dinner conversations revolved around Diane's listings or Robert's clients, with occasional interrogations about my grades or extracurriculars. There were no discussions about feelings, dreams, or fears. The emotional void at home made my friendship with Zoe Sullivan even more precious. We met in 3rd grade when she transferred to Westridge, and she was everything my adoptive family wasn't: warm, genuine, and emotionally available. Her family embraced me as one of their own, no questions asked. Meals at the Sullivan house were noisy, sometimes chaotic affairs with genuine laughter and comfortable silence. It was at their dinner table that I first understood what I was missing at home. "Your mom seems intense," Zoe observed once after Diane had picked me up from a sleepover, criticizing my appearance before we even left the Sullivans' driveway. "She has high standards," I replied automatically, reciting the explanation I'd been conditioned to give. Zoe just looked at me with concern. "You know it's okay to just be a kid sometimes, right?" "I didn't know, actually." Being just a kid was never an option in the Harrison household. As I entered my teenage years, questions about my biological parents began to surface more frequently. Who were they? Why did they give me up? Did I look like them? Did I inherit their talents or mannerisms? When I gathered the courage to ask, Diane, her responses were always vague and dismissive. "They were very young and couldn't provide for you," she would say briskly. "They made the responsible choice. Now have you finished your college essay drafts?" Any attempt to dig deeper was met with irritation. "Why do you need to know more? Isn't what we've given you enough?" The subject was always quickly changed, leaving my questions hanging in the air unanswered. So I learned to stop asking. I focused instead on being the perfect daughter, hoping that if I checked all the right boxes someday, I might feel like I truly belonged somewhere. But no matter how many awards I won or volunteer hours, I logged that sense of belonging remained elusive. I was a puzzle piece that almost fit, close enough that most people wouldn't notice, but I could always feel the edges that didn't quite connect. What I didn't realize then was that the disconnect wasn't my fault. It was by design, a carefully constructed facade that would begin crumbling on my 18th birthday. The months leading up to my 18th birthday were marked by Diane's unusual enthusiasm about planning what she called the social event of the season. Typically, my birthdays were modest affairs. Dinner at an upscale restaurant followed by a practical gift, usually something education-related. But for my 18th, Diane suddenly insisted on an extravagant celebration at the Addison Portland's most exclusive hotel. 18 is a milestone, Verlaine, she declared one evening in January, 3 months before the big day. She was scrolling through venue options on her tablet, barely looking up at me. "We need to mark the occasion appropriately." What struck me as odd was Diane's guest list. When she showed me the draft, it included dozens of her business associates, country club acquaintances, and distant relatives I barely knew. My friends were almost an afterthought. "Shouldn't my birthday party include, my friends?" I asked. Diane waved her hand dismissively. "Of course your little friends can come, but this is also an opportunity to introduce you to important people who can help with your future. Networking starts early, Verlaine." As the party planning progressed, I noticed Diane taking mysterious phone calls, stepping into another room and speaking in hushed tones. One afternoon, I overheard fragments of a conversation that left me confused. "Yes, everything is arranged. The 18th exactly as agreed. All paperwork will be ready. No, she doesn't suspect anything." When she emerged from her office and saw me in the hallway, she startled visibly before composing herself. "Eavesdropping is unbecoming, Verlaine," she said sharply. "Don't you have test prep to do?" Then came the incident with the documents. I was searching for a stapler in Diane's home office when I found a folder labeled Trust Disbursement, VH. Inside were financial documents I didn't fully understand. Something about scheduled payments and a final lump sum transfer to be executed on my 18th birthday. There was also mention of a contractual obligation fulfillment. Before I could make sense of it, Diane appeared in the doorway. "What do you think you're doing?" Her voice was ice cold as she snatched the folder from my hands. "I was looking for the stapler," I explained. "What's that about a trust? Is there money set aside for me?" Something flickered in Diane's eyes. Panic, perhaps. "It's nothing you need to concern yourself with. Just some financial planning Robert and I have done for your college education." She slipped the folder into her desk drawer and locked it. "The stapler is in the kitchen drawer where it always is." The encounter left me unsettled. Later that week, I tried asking Robert about it when Diane was at a showing. "Dad, is there something I should know about my birthday? Or some kind of trust fund?" Robert, usually so composed, nearly spilled his scotch. "Who told you about that?" "No one. I found some papers in Mom's office accidentally." He sighed heavily, rubbing his forehead. "Verlaine, there are arrangements that were made a long time ago. It's complicated, but I promise everything that's been done was with your best interests in mind." "What arrangements? Does this have something to do with my birth parents?" At the mention of my birth parents, Robert's expression closed off. "Your mother should be the one to discuss this with you. Just Try to understand that adult decisions are often complex. That non-answer only intensified my suspicions. When I confronted Diane that evening, she exploded. Why are you suddenly so obsessed with your birth parents? After everything we've done for you, your father and I have given you a life of privilege most people can only dream of. Is this how you show gratitude, by digging into matters that don't concern you? Her reaction was so disproportionate to my simple question that I knew something significant was being hidden from me. The tension at home became unbearable in the weeks that followed. Diane oscillated between exaggerated enthusiasm about the party and cold silence regarding anything about my past or future. Robert began drinking more heavily and avoiding being alone with me. 2 weeks before my birthday, I received an anonymous email from an address I didn't recognize. The message contained only a date, April 15th, my birthday, and the cryptic words, "The truth will come out." I showed it to Zoe during lunch break, my hands shaking slightly. "This is seriously creepy," she said, staring at my phone screen. "Do you think it's just a prank?" "I don't know, but something weird is definitely going on with my parents. Diane is obsessed with this party, but it feels like it's more for her than for me. And every time I ask about my birth parents or my past, they shut down or get angry." Zoe squeezed my hand. "Whatever happens, I've got your back. If things get weird at the party, just give me the signal and we'll make an excuse to leave." As my birthday approached, my emotions were a confused tangle. There was the expected excitement about turning 18, legally an adult, ready to step into a new phase of life. But overshadowing that was a growing anxiety about the secrets I sensed were about to be revealed. Something significant was going to happen at that party. I just had no idea how completely it would shatter the narrative of my life. April 15th arrived with picture-perfect spring weather, clear blue skies and cherry blossoms in full bloom. The symbolism wasn't lost on me: a fresh start, new beginnings. If only I'd known how prophetic that would be. The grand ballroom at the Addison had been transformed under Diane's exacting direction. Crystal chandeliers illuminated tables draped in champagne-colored silk, each centered with elaborate arrangements of white orchids and roses. A string quartet played softly in the corner. A 3-tiered cake decorated with intricate fondant designs that matched the invitation stood on a table covered in gifts. It looked like a wedding rather than an 18th birthday party. Even the place cards were formal, printed on heavy cardstock with gold foil edging. "Is this really necessary?" I had asked during the planning process. "Appearances matter, Verlaine," was Diane's predictable response. "The Harrisons have a certain standard to maintain." I spent the afternoon getting ready under Diane's supervision. My hair and makeup were done by professionals she had hired, resulting in an elegant updo and subtle makeup that made me look older than my years. The dress she'd selected was a designer piece in pale blue silk that cost more than a month's rent for most people. "Perfect," Diane declared after the final touches. "You look like a true Harrison." The comment made me pause. Not, "You look beautiful," or "You look happy," but "You look like a Harrison." Even on my birthday, it was about fitting the image, not about me as a person. Guests began arriving at 7. As expected, most were from Diane's social and professional circles: real estate colleagues, country club members, clients she wanted to impress. My small contingent of friends, including Zoe, looked out of place among the adults in business attire and cocktail dresses. Robert was already on his 3rd scotch before dinner was served, standing uncomfortably near the bar and checking his watch repeatedly. When I approached him, he hugged me stiffly and pressed a small velvet box into my hand. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. I want you to know, I've always been proud of you." His voice caught, and for a moment I thought I saw tears in his eyes. "No matter what happens tonight, remember that." Before I could ask what he meant, Diane swept over and pulled me away to meet the Johnsons, who just bought that lovely Tudor in Laurelhurst. The exchange left me even more uneasy. Throughout the evening, I noticed a middle-aged couple I didn't recognize watching me intently. The woman had auburn hair similar to mine, and something about the shape of the man's eyes seemed oddly familiar. Whenever I caught them looking, they would quickly glance away. They weren't mingling with the other guests, but remained slightly apart, speaking only to each other in hushed tones. "Who are those people?" I asked Diane during a brief moment alone. She followed my gaze and her expression hardened. "Just some business associates of your father's. Nothing for you to worry about." She immediately steered me toward another group of her friends, but not before I caught a flash of something like fear in her eyes. The conversations throughout the evening had an odd undercurrent. People kept making comments that went beyond typical birthday wishes. "This is quite a special day for you, isn't it?" said one of Diane's colleagues, with a knowing look. "You must be feeling quite liberated turning 18, remarked another. "I bet you're excited about what comes next," said a woman I'd never met, squeezing my arm with unusual familiarity. Each interaction left me more confused and on edge. Even the gifts seemed excessive. Jewelry that cost thousands, an envelope containing keys to a new car, a check with more zeros than I'd ever seen. These weren't typical 18th birthday presents, even by the Harrisons' lavish standards. As the evening progressed, Diane consumed glass after glass of champagne, unusual for someone who typically monitored her alcohol intake carefully at social functions. Her laugh became louder, her gestures more expansive, and her eyes took on a slightly manic gleam. She kept looking at her watch and exchanging tense glances with Robert, who continued to drink steadily at the bar. By the time the cake was brought out, a palpable tension had filled the room. Guests were picking up on the strange atmosphere, conversations becoming more subdued as everyone seemed to be waiting for something to happen. That something began when Diane, wobbling slightly in her designer heels, clinked a knife against her glass and called for everyone's attention. "The time has come," she announced, her words slightly slurred, "for the traditional birthday toast." The ballroom fell silent as Diane took the microphone, her perfectly manicured fingers gripping it too tightly. The string quartet stopped playing mid-song, leaving an awkward silence. All eyes turned to the front of the room where Diane stood swaying slightly next to the elaborate cake that still had unlit candles. "We're here to celebrate Verlaine's 18th birthday," she began, her voice artificially bright. 18 years since Robert and I welcomed this beautiful little girl into our home." A few guests nodded politely, though many seemed to sense something was off about Diane's demeanor. "We've given Verlaine everything," she continued. "The best schools, the best clothes, the best opportunities. We've molded her into a proper young lady, worthy of the Harrison name." She raised her glass. "To Verlaine, who has been a project of ours for exactly 18 years. The word project hung in the air, jarring and inappropriate. A few confused glances were exchanged among the guests. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Mom," I whispered urgently. "Maybe that's enough." She ignored me, taking another large sip of champagne. "You know, raising someone else's child isn't easy, especially when you have certain expectations to fulfill." Her smile became rigid. "But we did it. Contract fulfilled to the letter." "Contract? What contract?" My confusion deepened as an uncomfortable murmur spread through the crowd. Robert approached the small stage. "Diane, that's enough. Let's cut the cake." She shook her head, stepping away from him. "No, Robert. It's time for the truth." "Isn't that what we agreed? 18 years and then the truth?" She turned back to the bewildered audience. "You see, everyone, this isn't just a birthday. It's a contractual milestone." My heart began pounding so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. The strange documents, the mysterious phone calls, the tension at home, it was all coming to a head. "I've done my part," Diane announced, her voice suddenly bitter. 18 years of raising you for the money. Contract fulfilled." She looked directly at me, her eyes cold despite the flush of alcohol on her cheeks. "You were never really my daughter, Verlaine. You were a business arrangement." The room went completely still. I stood frozen, feeling as though the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. Business arrangement. Money. What was she talking about? Robert grabbed for the microphone. "Diane, stop this right now." She yanked it back. "Why should I stop? It's all legal and above board. We agreed to raise her until she was 18, and they paid us very well to do it. She laughed, a harsh sound without humor. College fund. Please. That money was our compensation for housing and feeding their mistake. Their mistake. My mind struggled to process what was happening. Whose mistake? Who had paid them? And then movement caught my eye. The middle-aged couple I'd noticed earlier were walking toward the stage, their faces set with determination. The woman's eyes, green like mine, were filled with tears and fury. "That's enough, Diane," the woman said, her voice carrying across the silent room despite having no microphone. "You've said more than enough." "Who are you?" someone in the crowd asked. The man put his arm protectively around the woman's shoulders. "My name is Michael Wright. This is my wife, Sarah. We're Verlaine's biological parents." A collective gasp rippled through the room. I stared at them, unable to speak, unable to move. My biological parents. Here now. And Diane Harrison has been lying to everyone, especially Verlaine, for 18 years. Sarah continued, her voice shaking with emotion. We never abandoned our daughter. We never wanted to give her up permanently. Michael stepped forward, addressing the crowd, but looking directly at me. When Verlaine was born, Sarah was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. We had no health insurance, no savings, and medical bills piling up. We were desperate. Sarah picked up the story. Diane, who is my cousin, offered what seemed like a blessing. She and Robert couldn't have children, and she proposed a private adoption arrangement. She would raise Verlaine temporarily while I underwent treatment, and we would send money for her care. Michael nodded grimly. The agreement was that when Verlaine turned 18, she would learn the truth and make her own decision about her future. We've been sending payments and letters for 18 years' money that was supposed to be put into a trust for Verlaine's education. Letters, I managed to whisper, finding my voice at last. You wrote to me. Sarah's eyes filled with fresh tears. Hundreds of letters, birthday cards, photos of us. We documented everything so you would know you were always loved, always wanted. Which she never showed you, Michael added, glaring at Diane. Just like she never put the money into a trust for you as promised. She kept it all. The money, the letters, the truth. Diane, surprisingly steady, given how much she'd had to drink, lifted her chin defiantly. We had a deal. I fulfilled my end. I raised her, educated her, gave her the Harrison name. You used her, Sarah shot back. You used her for status, for appearances, and for money. You never loved her. The accusation seemed to strike a nerve. Diane's face contorted with anger. Love, you think love pays for private school tuition, for violin lessons and SAT prep, for the lifestyle she's become accustomed to. She laughed bitterly. I did what was required, nothing more, nothing less. And honestly, it wasn't easy raising someone else's child. Someone who never quite fit, who always asked too many questions. Each word was like a physical blow. 18 years of feeling like I didn't quite belong, of walking on eggshells to earn Diane's approval. Suddenly it all made terrible sense. I wasn't a daughter. I was an obligation. A contract. The room had begun to empty as uncomfortable guests made discreet exits. Zoe had pushed her way to my side, her hand firmly gripping mine in silent support. Robert stood with his head bowed, unable to look at me. And my biological parents, Sarah and Michael Wright, watched me with a mixture of hope and heartbreak in their eyes. Verlaine, Sarah said gently, taking a step toward me. We've waited 18 years for this moment. To tell you that we love you, we've always loved you, and we never ever wanted to be separated from you. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. What could I possibly say? The foundation of my entire life had just been revealed as a lie. The woman I called mother had just publicly declared I was nothing but a financial transaction to her. And so I did the only thing I could in that moment. I turned and ran from the ballroom, leaving behind the cake, the presents, and 18 years of carefully constructed fiction. I ended up in a secluded alcove near the hotel's garden terrace, my designer dress bunched around me as I sat on a decorative bench, struggling to breathe through my tears. The beautiful spring night continued obliviously around me. Stars twinkling, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of cherry blossoms, the distant sound of traffic from downtown Portland. How could the world still look so normal when mine had just imploded? It was Zoe who found me first, her face etched with concern. Without a word, she sat beside me and wrapped her arms around my shoulders, letting me sob against her until my tears subsided into hiccuping breaths. "That was the most messed up thing I've ever witnessed," she said finally, handing me a cocktail napkin to wipe my eyes. "Are you okay?" Stupid question, I know. "I don't know what I am," I replied honestly, my voice hoarse. "I feel like I don't know anything anymore. Who I am, where I came from, who I'm supposed to be now." Zoe squeezed my hand. "You're still Verlaine, the same smart kind, slightly neurotic overachiever I've known since third grade. That hasn't changed. But everything else had. The narrative of my life, abandoned by birth parents, charitably taken in by the Harrisons, had been completely upended. I wasn't abandoned. I was essentially leased like a car with an 18-year payment plan." We sat in silence for a few minutes before I noticed movement at the entrance to the alcove. The couple, Sarah and Michael Wright, my biological parents, stood there hesitantly. "Verlaine." Sarah's voice was gentle, uncertain. "May we speak with you? If you'd prefer not to, we completely understand." "It's okay," I told Zoe. "I need to hear what they have to say." Zoe nodded, squeezing my hand once more before standing. "I'll be right inside if you need me." As Zoe left, Sarah and Michael cautiously approached, sitting on a bench across from me. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable. I had Sarah's auburn hair and heart-shaped face, Michael's green eyes and straight nose. Looking at them was like seeing pieces of myself reflected back at me. "We don't even know where to begin," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "There's 18 years to explain." "Try the beginning," I suggested, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Sarah nodded, taking a deep breath. "The beginning, then. We were very young when I got pregnant with you. I was 21. Michael was 23. We weren't married yet, barely making ends meet with entry-level jobs. But we were so happy about you. We had this tiny apartment that we painted yellow for your nursery." Michael smiled sadly. "We had so many plans. I was going to teach you to play baseball. Sarah had already joined a Mommy and Me music class for after you were born." "Then what happened?" I prompted when they both fell silent, lost in memories. Sarah's expression clouded. "When I was 7 months pregnant, I started having terrible headaches. After you were born, a perfect, beautiful baby girl, the headaches got worse. Tests showed I had a rare type of brain tumor. The prognosis was uncertain," Michael continued. "The treatment was experimental and expensive. Our insurance denied coverage because they classified it as investigational. We were looking at hundreds of thousands in medical bills. And we had a newborn," Sarah added. "We were desperate, terrified. That's when Diane came to the hospital." "Diane is your cousin?" I asked, trying to make sense of the connections. Sarah nodded. "Yes, though we were never close. She's several years older and from the wealthy side of the family. She heard about my diagnosis from my mother and came to visit. That's when she made her proposal. She and Robert had been trying to have a child for years without success," Michael explained. "Diane suggested what she called a private adoption arrangement. They would take care of you while Sarah underwent treatment. We would send money for your expenses, which would go into a trust fund for your education. Once Sarah recovered and we were financially stable, or when you turned 18, whichever came first, we would be reunited and explain everything." "It seemed like the answer to our prayers," Sarah said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "We could focus on fighting the cancer without worrying about whether we could care for you properly, and you would be with family, not strangers." "We signed a contract," Michael added. "It specified that Diane and Robert would share updates and photos regularly, would give you any letters or gifts we sent, and would tell you about us when you were old enough to understand. Most importantly, It stated that this was a temporary arrangement that would end either when we were back on our feet or on your 18th birthday. But as soon as the papers were signed and you were gone, things changed, Sarah continued. Diane moved to Portland with Robert. They changed their phone number. When we tried to visit after my first round of treatment, they said it would be too confusing for you. We sent money every month, Michael said. Far more than would be needed for your basic care. We sent letters, photos, small gifts. But our calls went unanswered. The few updates we received were formal and uninformative. Report cards, school photos, nothing personal. As the years went by, it became clear Diane had no intention of honoring the agreement, Sarah said. She wanted you as her daughter permanently, but we never stopped trying to reach you. We never stopped loving you. My treatment was successful, Sarah continued. We got back on our feet financially. We tried to enforce the original agreement through legal channels, but Diane had powerful connections. She threatened to drag things out in court for years to make it as traumatic for you as possible. Our lawyer advised us to wait until you turned 18, Michael explained. At that point, you would legally be an adult, and Diane's guardianship would end. We've been counting down the days preparing for this moment. We have 2 other children, Sarah added softly. Your brother Ethan is 15, and your sister Lily is 12. They've grown up knowing all about their big sister. There are photos of you all over our house. They can't wait to meet you. I had siblings. The revelation hit me like a physical shock. All these years I'd imagined myself alone in the world, and I had a brother and sister who knew about me, who were waiting for me. Before I could process this new information, Robert appeared at the entrance to the alcove. His face was haggard, his shoulders slumped. Verlaine, he said, his voice raspy. I need to talk to you. Michael stood protectively. I think you've done enough damage. Robert raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. I know. I don't deserve her forgiveness, but I need to explain. I found myself nodding. It's okay. I want to hear what he has to say. Robert approached cautiously, remaining standing as if he didn't feel worthy to sit. First, I want you to know that I didn't know the full extent of Diane's deception. I knew about the original arrangement, yes, but I thought Sarah and Michael had stopped sending letters years ago. I thought the money was going into your trust fund as agreed. You never questioned anything, Michael asked skeptically. Robert shook his head miserably. Diane handled all the finances, all the paperwork. And I traveled so much for work. Or at least that's the excuse I'm giving myself. He turned to me, his eyes filled with tears. The truth is, I was a coward. I suspected things weren't right, but I didn't want to rock the boat. And somewhere along the way, Verlaine, I genuinely came to love you as my daughter. If you loved her, you should have protected her, Sarah said sharply. You're right, Robert acknowledged. I failed her. I failed all of you. And I'm so sorry. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thumb drive. This contains copies of all the financial records, all the correspondence Diane kept from you. It won't undo the damage, but maybe it will help you understand. I took the thumb drive, turning it over in my hand. Thank you, I said simply. Robert nodded, then hesitated. For what it's worth, these last 18 years, they weren't all a lie for me. I'm proud of the person you've become, Verlaine, and I hope someday you might find it in your heart to let me be part of your life again in whatever way you're comfortable with. With that, he turned and walked away, his steps heavy with the weight of his regrets. I looked from the thumb drive to the faces of my biological parents, feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of emotions coursing through me. Anger, confusion, grief for the relationship I thought I had, hope for the one that might be possible now. I can't go back to the Harrison house tonight, I said finally. You can stay with me, Zoe said, reappearing at the entrance to the alcove. She'd clearly been listening, standing guard to make sure I was okay. I nodded gratefully, then turned back to Sarah and Michael. I need time to process all of this, but I'd like to meet again. Soon. Sarah's face lit up with cautious hope. We'd like that very much. Whenever you're ready. As I left the hotel with Zoe, my elaborate birthday party in ruins behind me, I felt a strange mixture of devastation and liberation. The life I'd known was over, but perhaps the one I was meant to have was just beginning. Zoe's family welcomed me with open arms, setting up their guest room without asking questions when we arrived. Mrs. Sullivan simply hugged me and said, "Stay as long as you need, sweetheart." It was the kind of unconditional acceptance I'd never experienced from Diane. The next morning, I went back to the Harrison house while Diane was at work to pack some of my belongings. Robert was there looking like he hadn't slept at all. "I'm staying at Zoe's for now," I told him, stuffing clothes into a duffel bag. "I can't be here with her." He nodded, making no attempt to change my mind. "I understand. I've opened a new bank account in your name. I've transferred what I could. It's not the full amount that should have been in your trust, but it's something to get you started." I paused my packing. "Are you and Diane getting divorced?" "Yes," he said simply. "What she did, what we did, it's unforgivable. But her betrayal went beyond you, Verlaine. She betrayed me too. Our entire marriage was built on lies." I felt a surprising pang of sympathy for him. Robert had been complicit, yes, but he had also been manipulated by Diane's machinations. And unlike Diane, he seemed genuinely remorseful. Over the next few weeks, I began the delicate process of getting to know Sarah and Michael Wright, my biological parents. We met at neutral locations at first: coffee shops, parks, quiet restaurants, where we could talk privately. Each meeting revealed another piece of the puzzle of my origins. The most emotional moment came when Sarah brought a box of baby photographs. "These are from your first 3 months before we had to let you go," she explained, spreading the photos on the table between us. There I was, a tiny bundle with a shock of auburn hair cradled in Sarah's arms, Michael bottle-feeding me with a look of absolute adoration. My tiny hand wrapped around Sarah's finger. "You were such a good baby," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "So alert, so curious about everything. You rarely cried unless you were hungry or tired. You used to fall asleep instantly if I hummed the Beatles' Blackbird," Michael added, smiling at the memory. "Nothing else worked as well. We used to joke that you were going to be a music critic." It was surreal seeing evidence of a life I had no memory of, a time when I was loved so completely by these people who were strangers to me now. But with each meeting, each shared story, the strangeness began to fade. I started to see echoes of myself in them, not just physical traits, but mannerisms, preferences, ways of thinking that had never made sense in the context of the Harrison household. Sarah had the same habit of twisting her hair when concentrating. Michael and I both organized our food before eating it. They both shared my love of historical documentaries and my inexplicable aversion to the texture of bananas. Small things, perhaps, but they created a sense of connection that grew stronger with each encounter. The most nerve-wracking meeting was with my siblings. We arranged to meet at a pizzeria that had a quiet corner where we could talk. I arrived early, my stomach in knots, and watched through the window as they approached. Sarah and Michael, walking on either side of a teenage boy and a preteen girl who were obviously scanning the restaurant eagerly. The moment they spotted me, both kids' faces lit up with recognition, though we'd never met. Later, I would learn that the family home was filled with school photos Diane had reluctantly sent over the years. Ethan and Lily had grown up seeing my face, knowing I was their sister, waiting for the day we could meet. Lily launched herself at me with a hug before any introductions could be made. "You look just like your pictures, but prettier in real life," she declared. Then immediately began telling me about her soccer team and asking if I'd come to her next game. Ethan was more reserved, but his eyes, identical to mine and Michael's, were warm as he shook my hand. "This is kind of weird, but good weird, you know," he said. "We've been hearing about you our whole lives." That afternoon was a revelation. We ate pizza and shared stories, discovering similarities and differences. Ethan and I both loved science fiction and hated coconut. Lily and I shared a talent for art that apparently came from Sarah's side of the family. They asked questions about my life with a curiosity that was genuine, but never invasive. Most importantly, there was no awkwardness, no sense of forcing a connection. It felt natural, as if we were simply picking up threads of a relationship that had been temporarily interrupted. While I was building these new connections, I was also dealing with the aftermath of Diane's betrayal. The thumb drive Robert had given me contained years of financial records showing how Diane had misappropriated the money sent for my care. Instead of going into a trust fund as agreed, the monthly payments from the Wrights had been funneled into Diane's personal accounts and real estate investments. There were also hundreds of scanned letters and cards from the Wrights to me, birthday wishes, holiday greetings, updates on their lives, all expressing love and a desperate hope to reunite. Diane had kept every one perhaps as leverage, but had never shown them to me. Reading them now, years later, was both heartbreaking and healing. I could trace the evolution of their lives through these messages. Sarah's recovery from cancer, the births of my siblings, their professional successes and personal joys, all shared with a daughter they never stopped considering their own. I consulted with a lawyer about potential legal action against Diane. The attorney explained that while what Diane did was morally reprehensible, the legal case was complicated. The statute of limitations had expired on some potential charges, and pursuing others would involve a lengthy, expensive, and emotionally draining court battle. The question you need to ask yourself, the lawyer said gently, is what outcome you're seeking. Punishment for Diane, financial compensation, or closure, and the ability to move forward with your life. It was a profound question, and I took time to consider it carefully. In the end, I decided that pursuing legal action would keep me tethered to the past to Diane in a way that would hinder my healing. The most effective revenge, I realized, would be to build a happy life connected to the family that truly loved me, a family Diane had tried and failed to keep from me. That decision marked a turning point in my journey toward rebuilding my sense of identity and belonging. 6 months after my disastrous 18th birthday party, I made the decision to legally change my name from Verlaine Harrison to Verlaine Wright. It wasn't a rejection of my entire past. Those 18 years had shaped me in many ways, both good and bad, but rather an affirmation of my true origins and my chosen future. The name change coincided with my move to Seattle, where I decided to attend the University of Washington. It was close enough to Portland that I could visit the Wrights regularly, but far enough from the Harrison home that I wouldn't risk running into Diane at the grocery store. The university had an excellent psychology program, which I'd chosen after much reflection on my experiences. I want to understand family dynamics, I explained to Sarah during a weekend visit to their home in the suburbs of Portland. I want to help other people who've experienced family trauma or identity issues. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. You've always been empathetic, even as a tiny baby. You seemed to know when I was having a bad day with my treatments. You'd be extra cuddly as if you were trying to comfort me. These little glimpses into my earliest days were precious to me, filling in the blanks of a personal history that had been deliberately kept from me. Each new memory shared, each photo discovered, helped me piece together the puzzle of who I was and where I came from. The Wrights' home had become a sanctuary for me, a place where I was unconditionally accepted. My room there, technically the guest room, but increasingly personalized with my belongings, was the opposite of my sterile bedroom in the Harrison house. Here there were family photos on the walls, including several of baby me that had been hidden away for 18 years. There were handmade quilts and mismatched furniture chosen for comfort rather than appearance. Most importantly, there was laughter, honest communication, and genuine affection. Ethan and Lily had embraced me as their sister without reservation. Ethan would text me about science fiction books he thought I'd enjoy, or send me links to interesting articles related to my psychology studies. Lily wrote me elaborate letters decorated with her artwork and called regularly to update me on her soccer team's progress and middle school drama. They included me in their lives as if I'd always been present, filling me in on inside jokes and family traditions with patient enthusiasm. My relationship with Robert evolved into something unexpected. While I couldn't forgive him completely for his role in the deception, I recognized that his remorse was genuine. We maintained limited contact, meeting for coffee occasionally when I visited Portland. He had divorced Diane and moved to a modest apartment, leaving behind the materialistic lifestyle that had been so important to her. He never asked for forgiveness outright, but showed it through his actions, respecting my boundaries, supporting my decisions without trying to influence them, and providing practical help without strings attached. Diane was another matter entirely. When the dust settled after the birthday revelation, she had attempted to rewrite the narrative. She claimed she had always intended to tell me the truth when I turned 18, that the trust fund money had been invested on my behalf, rather than misappropriated, that keeping me from my biological family had been for my own protection. When these lies failed to gain traction, she switched tactics, portraying herself as the victim of ungratefulness after sacrificing so much to raise me. I decided to confront her one last time before leaving for Seattle. We met at a cafe of my choosing, neutral ground where she couldn't control the environment as she had always done at home. She arrived impeccably dressed as always, not a hair out of place, but there was a brittleness to her composure that hadn't been there before. The scandal had affected her real estate business. No one wanted to work with someone who had essentially trafficked a child for profit. Her social standing had crumbled as former friends distanced themselves. For someone who had built her entire identity on appearances and status, it was a devastating fall. "I suppose you're happy now," she said by way of greeting, her tone bitter. "You've ruined everything I built." "I didn't ruin anything, Diane," I replied calmly. "You did that yourself when you decided to treat a child, me, as a business transaction." "You have no idea what you're talking about," she snapped. "Do you think it was easy raising someone else's child? Dealing with your questions, your neediness, your constant desire for approval?" Her words should have hurt, but strangely they didn't. I saw Diane clearly now, a deeply insecure woman who had used me as an accessory to enhance her image, never seeing me as a person with my own needs and feelings. "I didn't ask to be brought into your home," I said. "You arranged that yourself with promises you never intended to keep. You stole 18 years that should have been spent with people who genuinely loved me. And for what status money? The appearance of being a perfect family." Diane's expression hardened. "I gave you opportunities most children could only dream of. Private education, extracurricular activities, connections to the right people. You would have had none of that with the rights." "What I would have had was love," I replied. "Real, unconditional love. Not approval contingent on how well I performed or how good I made you look to your friends." She scoffed. "Love doesn't pay for college, Verlaine. Love doesn't open doors in the real world." "Maybe not. But it gives you a foundation, a sense of security and self-worth that no amount of money or connections can provide." I stood up, ready to end the conversation. "I didn't come here for an apology. I know I won't get one. I came to tell you that despite everything you did, I'm going to be okay. Better than okay. I'm going to build a life full of genuine connections and honest relationships, everything you tried to keep from me." As I turned to leave, Diane called after me. "They'll disappoint you eventually, you know. These perfect biological parents you've put on a pedestal. No family is as ideal as you think." I looked back at her, feeling a sudden wave of pity. "I don't expect them to be perfect, Diane. I just expect them to be real. That's something you never understood." That was the last time I spoke to Diane Harrison. I walked away from that cafe feeling lighter, having finally severed the last emotional ties to the woman who had called herself my mother, but had never truly been one. The journey of rebuilding my identity and finding my place in the world didn't end there, of course. There were still difficult days, moments of anger at the deception that had shaped my early lifetimes when I questioned everything I thought I knew about myself. But there were also moments of profound joy and discovery. Family holiday celebrations with the Wrights, late-night conversations with my siblings, the gradual building of traditions and inside jokes that belonged uniquely to us. I continued therapy, working through the complex emotions surrounding my unusual upbringing. I connected with support groups for others who had experienced family deception or identity issues, finding solidarity and understanding among people with similar stories. And I threw myself into my psychology studies, determined to use my experiences to help others navigate their own family complications. As my second year of college began, I found myself settling into a new understanding of family and belonging. Family, I realized, isn't just about blood relations or legal documents. It's about who shows up for you, who accepts you as you are, who makes space for your authentic self to emerge and thrive. The Wrights had done that for me, welcoming me back into their lives with open arms after 18 years of forced separation. Zoe and her family had done it too, offering sanctuary when I needed it most. Even Robert, in his flawed and complicated way, had eventually chosen truth and accountability over convenience and denial. I decided to change my perspective on what had happened to me. Instead of seeing myself as a victim of Diane's manipulation, I began to view myself as a survivor who had found her way back to where she belonged. The journey had been painful, but it had led me to a deeper understanding of myself and what truly mattered in life. Today, as I look at the framed photo on my desk, a recent Wright family picture with me right in the center, surrounded by Sarah, Michael, Ethan, and Lily, I feel a sense of peace that once seemed impossible. My story didn't end with the shocking revelation at my 18th birthday party. In many ways, that's when my real story began. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed how you saw yourself? Or have you found your way to a chosen family that accepts you completely? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if my story has resonated with you in any way, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to find where you truly belong. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you the courage to seek your own truth, whatever it may be.